Welcome to Business Chats with Debbie, where we talk big stories with small businesses. I'm your host, Debbie Wolberton, and today's my guest is Chris Fooks from Lacuna Wills. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm not too bad, you?
Bit wet and bedraggled, but apart from that, all good. Happy to spend some time with you this afternoon. Can't think of a better way to spend a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, talking about wills and LPAs and estate planning.
Yes.
Of all things.
Yes, a thorny topic that nobody ever really wants to discuss because we're all immortal, aren't we? We're going to live forever.
We're not going to die, no. We don't have to do wills, no.
I don't need that. I'm worth dead more than I am alive. But yeah, it is a case of when you speak with clients, much like you could self as an accountant, we know that Benjamin Franklin said that there are only two certainties in life, death and taxes. And you deal with one and I deal with the other. So yeah, the holy trinity of estate planning is wills, trusts and lasting powers of attorney.
Yeah.
And as I've said, a will really, for want of a better word, is a utility good. You will use it eventually, just not too soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And people are frightened of it. They seem to think, once I've done a will, that's it, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
But no, it's not. It's something you can do, put away, and you'll need it years and years and years in advance, and your family are not going to be left with the heartache and the issues that arise if you don't have a valid will in place.
Well, there's exactly that. And wills as well, they're very organic, I suppose. Someone in their lifetime would probably rewrite their will maybe 3 or 4 times because, as you said, people's situations change, whether that's a birth of a new child or inheritance of money or getting married or divorced, yeah, any of the above. So I would say to anyone, just have a will in place, regardless of whether your estate value is in its millions or you believe you have nothing. It just makes sure that, sadly, when you do pop your clogs, that your will, which is like a story really, you're identifying people in your will, whether it's executors, guardians, trustees, beneficiaries. You're just making sure that your story is told and you have the people, granting your wishes and distributing your estate to people you trust and hope will do a good job for you.
Yeah, and it goes where you want it to go. Do you know what I mean? It can quite easily end up in the state's coffers if you've got nobody for it to go to.
Yeah, obviously we have the rules of intestacy which dictate how someone's estate is distributed if they die without a will. But again, those rules of intestacy could mean legitimately you have a second or third cousin you haven't spoken to in 30 years who could be potentially the sole beneficiary of your estate. Yeah. Why take that chance? It doesn't have to be complicated. Most of my hundreds of clients I've had over the years, you feel that sense of relief. Actually, their shoulders lift up and they smile once we've completed it all, and they're like, "Oh, that wasn't too bad, Christopher." Actually, I said, "Well, nobody cried today," which is always a bonus.
No.
So yeah, it's really important to protect your estate. Obviously, when you pass, but obviously when you're alive as well.
Yeah, so do make sure you've got your estate planning in place so that when you do eventually pass away, you're not going to pay huge amounts of tax because it's all done. You've gone through everything you've got and sat with you, and you've worked out the best way to deal with that so that you don't have huge inheritance tax and taxes when you go. Exactly,
and also again, circling back to the size of your estate. Regardless, having a will in place makes sure that if a grant of probate is required, etc., it just makes sure the whole estate administration after death can just be expedited, and it's a lot easier than having to get letters of administration and other things. Because at the end of the day, when you write a will, you're obviously you're a caring, loving person because you want to make sure that your beneficiaries are looked after, and in the same breath, you want to make sure that if you do pass away, the people who you love and trust have the correct paperwork in place. You don't want to leave them in limbo because as humans we only have a certain amount of emotional bandwidth, and generally people are, if you've popped your clogs, you'll hope they're going to be grieving and upset. In some cases they might be waving off and
the last thing they need is all the issues that go with it if you haven't got a will in place.
Exactly. Yeah.
And let people know where your will is.
Well, this is it. A lot of clients I speak to as well and say, okay, so we've written the will, we've completed the attestation, which is the signing of the will. What next? And we say, well, the best advice is to make sure the will is put into storage somewhere. And there's plenty of fantastic providers out there. I won't plug the one that I use, but the idea is that the document is stored securely. There's a certificate that's produced. The will is registered as well, and again, it's just it's that fail-safe approach that you could write a will, and then the person who, once you've popped your clogs, picks the will up and says, I don't like what I see in that will.
Yeah.
Wills disappear all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that they're stored securely, certificates are produced, and they go to your executors.
Yeah. And alongside that, obviously, wills and estate plan is mainly geared for when you die. It still astounds me how many people do not know about lasting power of attorneys and how important lasting power of attorneys are. Completely. And even now I explain them and these look, really?
Yeah. I think, you've hit the nail on the head there. A lot of the things that I talk about with clients is a case of you don't know what you don't know. And I'm sure, when you explain to maybe high net worth clients complex tax situations, they're like, well, I've never thought about that. And I said, well, fundamentally, you and I, we're paid to think, aren't we? That's what people do. They pay us to think on their behalf. So when you approach clients about lasting powers of attorney, I'm very much of it's a belt and braces approach. If we're going to complete estate planning for you, yes, deal with your assets when you pass away, but also what happens to you if you lose capacity. And more often not, people say, well, capacity is, getting old and suffering from vascular dementia. Capacity could be anything. It could be knocked down by a car. It could be getting a life-changing illness. COVID. Oh yeah, COVID. Yeah. So they really are just important living trusts, for want of a better word, whereby you as the donor are nominating people to be your attorneys. Again, people you love and trust, to make sure your affairs are taken care of if you lose capacity, whether that's managing an investment portfolio, making sure bills are paid, and with health and welfare LPAs, making sure that medical decisions that are in line with your requirements and wishes are followed. Basically, I mean, I can honestly say, hand on heart, that I've never had a client, once you've explained LPAs to them, say, oh, I'm not really interested in doing that. I'd rather make sure that if I lose capacity, my family have to go and get a deputyship order and pay quite a lot of money, not just up front, but ongoing. Because again, capacity could be fleeting, or you could lose capacity and physically be fine for many, many years. And again, circling back to people saying, well, it's LPA is always age related. My youngest clients who have LPAs are in their 20s. One of them, she has no family, high net worth individual, has quite a lot of investments, property, etc. Her passion is horse riding. She's got 2 beautiful horses. And I said to her, you're a case study in the making.
Fall off your horse,
Oh, I never thought about that. So LPAs really are just, as I said, the holy trinity of wills, trusts and LPAs. They're the kind of, they just make sure everything's tied off with a neat ribbon and you're protected. And I pray that you never need them, but the amount of families who have had to use them have come to me and said, crikey, Christopher, I'm so glad we took your advice. Sometimes at 10, 15 years down the line. Others, recently, sadly, it's been within executing documents, they've been needed within 6 months. As you said, due to the past couple of years, people are a lot more vulnerable.
And I explain to, even if they everybody I speak to, whether or not they're a client or a prospective client, it's always, have you got wills and LPAs in place? And when you actually explain, well, have you got a joint bank account with your wife? Well, yeah. Well, if anything happened to you, then that bank account gets frozen and you can't access your money. What's my money? No, not in the eyes of the law. No, it's not. You do what I mean? And if you haven't got a lasting power of attorney in place, you're basically up the creek without a paddle, really, aren't you?
Very much so. And I think the other thing is, going back to educating people as well, that a lot of business owners don't appreciate actually that you can have business LPAs whereby something happens to you, again, people you love and trust, maybe your accountant, could step in and manage your business for you to a degree on your behalf. And obviously that changes if you're, if you have a shareholders agreement and memorandums of association and articles, sometimes that's taken care of. But ultimately I would say, have it in place, because it's better to have it and it's needed as opposed to not having it and it is needed and you're snookered.
Especially if you're only the directors, the only mandate signer on the mandate, you've got no chance.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? You're just in real trouble.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for coming in this afternoon, because I don't think people, it's one of my passions, it's a passion for me. LPAs is a real passion for me, getting everybody with the lasting power of attorneys in place. And wills and estate planning, do you know what I mean? It's one of them things where people don't realise as they get older how much they've actually got, how much money they've actually got put away, how much they've got in property and shares and pensions and everything else. And it's just sitting down with somebody and actually looking at it and saying, well, actually, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, just to make sure that you don't pay extortionate amounts of tax when you don't really have to.
Yeah, and exactly. And you know, a lot of these decisions, especially when people actually engage me, there's always the cost of, like, you know, how much is this going to cost? You know, thousands and thousands of pounds. So well, it doesn't have to be, actually. I'm a professional estate planner. This is my bread and butter. I'm a member of the IPW, which is the Institute of Professional Will Writers. We have hundreds of members, which I'm also a council member of the IPW as well. And all of our members, you know, they're professional estate planners, but they're really cost effective because this is their bread and butter, as it were. So I would say to anyone, you know, if you don't have anything in place, or even if you do have something in place that's 20 years old, the chances are your will's going to probably be out of date.
Yeah.
If you don't have a lasting power of attorney, put them in place. But just don't be afraid to have these conversations, because only good things will come from it, I promise.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it doesn't cost anything for the conversation. No. It's going to cost you to do the work after you've had the conversation, but it's not going to cost anything at the beginning to have a chat and say, this is what I've got, what can we do? And then you'll come back with a plan and say, this is what we can do, and this is how much it's going to cost you. Yeah,
it's no more complicated than that. And certainly with not so much existing clients, because some of my clients I've had, you know, 15, 20 odd years. I'm kind of a family member, get invited to weddings, you know, baptisms, Christmas, sadly funerals as well. Not the best place to give out business cards either, to be fair. But yeah, it's, you know, new clients. So I always say to them, all of this is, I'm sure with your clients as well, this is just looking at your aims and objectives. You know, this is what you should do. This is the advice. This is, you know, how we can plan for the future. What you then choose to do with that client is entirely up to you. Yeah. But I think the whole point is informing and educating people so they can make informed decisions, basically.
Yeah. So if you need your will doing, or you don't have a clue what an LPA is and you want more information, then get in touch with Chris. You can find him on LinkedIn and all social media channels. And just have that chat. Do you know what I mean? If you decide later on you don't want to do it, at least you've had that chat and you've found out what your options are. Because I'm sure you will, if you ever need an LPA, it's a much cheaper option to get it done before you need it than after you need one and you haven't got one in place. So that's me for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you so much for coming in this afternoon.
Pleasure as always. Thank you.
And I will see you soon. Thanks, guys.